On United Nations Human Rights Day, a look back at a terrible year of human rights violations. U.S. lawmakers issue a controversial report on CIA terror interrogations. And William and Kate wrap up their whirlwind trip to the U.S. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Wednesday is United Nations Human Rights Day. Many observers describe 2014 as a horrific year for human rights violations. War is the major source of abuses around the world, and in the past 12 months, major conflicts have intensified. We begin our coverage with Henry Ridgwell from London.
Syria's civil war has killed hundreds of thousands and forced millions from their homes. The conflict has splintered and spread to neighbouring Iraq, with government forces, moderate opposition fighters, Islamist militants and Kurdish fighters all battling for territory. The international community must take some responsibility, says Steve Crawshaw, senior advisor at Amnesty International.
The failures to address the Syrian conflict better and earlier, and to really speak out loudly and put the kind of pressures that were needed for human rights to be better observed.
Barrels packed with explosives dropped from helicopters have been used widely by Syrian government forces, killing thousands of civilians. Syria's key ally, Russia, should speak out against their use, says Director of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Roth.
They allow ISIS to say that at least it is standing up to the Russian-backed government in Damascus that is trying to commit mass murder among civilians in opposition-held areas.
Moscow is fueling conflict in eastern Ukraine by providing military support to separatists. Close to 4,500 people have been killed, and there are numerous cases of abduction and torture. On a recent visit to Moscow, Roth said the situation could deteriorate further.
I think it is political insecurity that lies behind all of this, and I fear that this is only going to intensify as Russia now encounters some real economic problems as a consequence of Putin's adventurism in Ukraine.
Moscow's increasing isolation has led to the worst crackdown on dissent within Russia since Soviet times, according to Roth.
All this adds up to is that the architecture is in place for a still more intense crackdown should Putin need it.
China is accused of rolling back recent progress on human rights with its ongoing crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. Again, Steve Crawshaw of Amnesty.
Those basic rights of freedom of expression and assembly are simply being denied.
The spread of Islamist militant groups in Africa is driving human rights violations on a vast scale. Killings and suicide attacks by Boko Haram in Nigeria are intensifying, while Nigerian government forces are accused of beheadings and torture. In Egypt, rights activists say the hopes of the Arab Spring protesters are all but extinguished. But Amnesty International is highlighting two key achievements elsewhere in the past 12 months.
In Sri Lanka, there is now an international inquiry into the terrible killings of 2009, where tens of thousands of civilians died. Also, in UN terms, there's the Arms Trade Treaty, which we've been campaigning for 20 years.
Overall, though, Human Rights Day 2014 will likely be seen as a reminder of the vast scale of abuses in many parts of the world. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, for more insight on the state of global human rights, we are joined by Adote Akwe, Managing Director, Government Relations, Amnesty International, USA. Mr. Akwe, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
Now, looking at that report, and you've been in this business for quite a long time, how would you describe the year we are in, 2013 also, and looking back 2012? Are things just gotten that bad?
It is arguably been a very, very bad year in terms of human rights. The newsreel that you just showed highlighted the issues in Egypt, in the Ukraine, the crackdown in Hong Kong. It showed the unrest in Nigeria. And there was also, of course, the issue of Ebola, which is not a human rights violation, but the response to it, both in terms of resources and in terms of treatment of people from West Africa, and the rearing up of potential racist types of stereotyping is disturbing. So it's been a very hard year. We mentioned South Sudan, the conflict there that has killed so many people and displaced all of that hope with the optimism of South Sudan becoming independent. And then, of course, you have perennial challenges such as in the Great Lakes region as well as in Sudan itself.
Yeah. Now, other than just looking at these situations and giving some analysis, is there anything really that can be done to stop this, to reduce the violations of human rights?
Well, I think mention was made of the ratification as well as the coming into force of the Arms Trade Treaty. It's not going to solve everything, but it is going to potentially put brakes on arms supplies going to questionable forces and going to governments that have poor human rights records. It's going to act as some kind of brake and some kind of accountability. But promoting human rights and protecting human rights is slow and tedious work, and it demands persistence, and I think that's the key.
There's mention in the report of some gains, and then those gains kind of get lost along the way. Does it appear that perhaps sometimes when there are certain interests, actors, whether they're state actors or others, don't really care about whatever existing human rights protocols that exist?
Well, there's clearly the desire to do whatever they want. And so the question is, how do you encourage restraint and respect for human rights standards? And the only way to do that is, of course, transparency and accountability, which is why the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is so important, and why vigilance by both African governments or governments in general, as well as civil society, is critical. And that's a trend that has also, unfortunately, been alarming. But we need to protect that.
What do you do in situations where, for example, governments are fighting some vicious groups, like the case of Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab in the case of Kenya and even Somalia?
Yeah. There, I think we must not allow these governments to make the argument that the alternative, in other words, these forces are so bad that any means is justifiable. Because in the end, that reduces the legitimate government to being no better than the insurgent force. And that also results in the human rights violations being committed not only by the insurgents, but also by the government, and we move backwards.
Yeah, very quickly, over the years, have things been getting just worse year by year?
No, I think that there's growing awareness, and that in itself leads to a larger human rights movement of people who are not going to allow this to happen. And so you have to take the setbacks also with the hope that this movement becomes active and engaged and does not take the status quo as unchangeable.
Okay, Adote, thank you very much for joining us today. Well, Adote Akwe is Managing Director, Government Relations at Amnesty International in the United States here. Now, we continue our Human Rights Day coverage with a closer look at the Syrian refugee crisis. Millions of Syrians have fled over the borders, but only a fraction have been given asylum in countries outside the region. Again, here's Henry Ridgewell.
Around 4 million Syrians, almost a fifth of the population, have fled the spiralling civil war in the past 3 years. The majority are living in poverty in Syria's neighbouring countries, says Sharif El-Sayed Ali of Amnesty International.
95% of them, 3.8 million, are in just 5 countries. That's Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq and Egypt.
About 150,000 Syrian refugees have made it to the European Union. Many have arrived on dilapidated boats across the Mediterranean. Tens of thousands have drowned on the journey. Europe is bearing only a fraction of the burden of Syria's neighbours, says Sharif.
Almost the same number of people who arrived in Turkey in the space of 10 days in September. And it's a tenth, Turkey is hosting more than 1.5 million people, so that's 10 times this number in just one country.
Less than 2% of Syrian refugees have been offered sanctuary by the rest of the world. The United States has offered what it calls an open-ended number of resettlement places for Syrian refugees.
The US has a very long process of checking people before they're resettled, and so far that has been an issue, in that people haven't been able to make it there. If you look elsewhere, Russia, Japan, China, zero, nothing. Not a single person that have offered to take. The same goes for the Gulf countries.
At a recent conference in Germany, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, urged international action.
This is not only a responsibility of the countries of the region, this is a responsibility of the whole of the international community.
Many Western countries, including Britain and the United States, are giving hundreds of millions of dollars. But last month, the United Nations was forced to suspend food aid to 1.7 million Syrian refugees, blaming pledges that were not honoured. Nazar fled Homs in Syria and now lives in Lebanon.
I have 2 disabled children. The UN used to help. It's a catastrophe.
The UN has identified 380,000 people it says are in desperate need of resettlement, many of them victims of torture or rape, many of them children. Human rights groups want delegates at Tuesday's conference to commit to resettling at least 5% of Syria's refugees by the end of 2015. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee has released the highly anticipated and controversial report on the interrogation techniques used by the CIA in America's war on terror. Well, now, the comprehensive report describes in detail the use of waterboarding and other harsh measures in an effort to extract information from terrorist suspects and prevent further attacks on the United States. VOA's Jeff Selden reports.
The long-awaited report is highly critical, detailing how a nation reeling from the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 responded. And in doing so, Senate Intelligence Committee Chair, Democrat Dianne Feinstein, says the CIA went too far.
The report released today examines the CIA's secret overseas detention of at least 119 individuals and the use of coercive interrogation techniques, in some cases amounting to torture.
Even worse, she says,
coercive interrogation techniques did not produce the vital, otherwise unavailable intelligence the CIA has claimed.
After a 5-year, $40 million investigation, the report states what U.S. President Barack Obama said months ago.
We tortured some folks.
While also accusing the CIA of deceiving the White House and misleading the public about what was going on at secret prisons in places like Poland and Romania, including the near-drowning technique known as waterboarding, simulated here. The report says 9/11 attack mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was subjected to waterboarding 183 times. Agents also administered rectal rehydration, a form of feeding through the rectum, though there was no medical reason for doing so. Still, other detainees were subjected to hundreds of hours of sleep deprivation, told their families would be harmed, and, in one case, sexually abused. The CIA admits mistakes were made, but Director John Brennan said the interrogations helped thwart attacks, save lives, and claims they helped the U.S. find al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, something the report disputes. Meanwhile, a group of former CIA officials launched a website defending the agency's work, echoing the views of then-President George W. Bush.
If a captured terrorist has information about a plot against our homeland, we need to know what he knows.
Former CIA official Charles Allen says they did what they had to do.
I was at the small group, I was at the table. I could have had reservations. But the pressure on us and our determination to get back at al-Qaeda and get inside and dismantle and destroy it were really overwhelming.
But on the Senate floor, former prisoner of war Republican Senator John McCain held firm, calling the CIA's activities a stain on the national honor.
We gave up much in the expectation that torture would make us safer. Too much.
Lawmakers and even administration officials have expressed concern the release of the report could lead to attacks on U.S. personnel or facilities, and U.S. embassies and military installations have been on heightened alert. Jeff Selden, VOA News, Washington.
Well, South African judge Tokusile Masipa has granted prosecutors an appeal of the culpable homicide verdict against Oscar Pistorius, clearing them to seek a more serious murder conviction in the Supreme Court. Judge Masipa announced her decision Wednesday, saying she thinks the appeal has a chance to succeed. She originally ruled in September that prosecutors gave only circumstantial evidence that Pistorius was guilty of premeditated murder when he fatally shot his girlfriend River Steenkamp and handed down the lesser conviction of culpable homicide. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, how Ugandan women are using traditional methods to create masterpieces. Stay with us.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Welcome back. A traditional basket weaving skill is taking Ugandan women to new heights. Africa 54's Paul Ndiho joins us now to tell us all about it. Paul.
Thanks, Vincent. In Western Uganda, more than 200 women, dubbed the Lubona Basket Weavers Association, are using naturally dyed raffia to make baskets of all shapes and sizes. The baskets are then sold to international markets. Baskets have long been part of Ugandan culture, and women here still use the traditional ones known as echibo to carry various goods. Here at Rubona Basket Weavers Association, an outlet on the outskirts of Fort Portal, Uganda, women are trained and dedicated to weaving basket masterpieces. They use naturally dyed raffia to make their products. Karen Kaganzi is the sales manager at Rubona Basket Weavers Association. She explains the process.
Out of this plant, we get maroon, we get yellow and brown. From this plant, we use the tubers, the roots.
About 200 women work here. They produce and sell about 500 baskets each month. This is a very successful project that is self-sustaining and contributes to the economic independence of the local women in the region. These women here have developed a way of incorporating modern designs into traditional basket weaving and sell their work at reasonable prices.
This is a pot basket for smaller clothes. Mattresses are inflated like 6,000. These are pen holders for pens in the office. This is a bowl. This is for fruits and decoration. One can use it for fruits and one for decoration.
To make quality baskets, the weavers select different plants and then extract their leaves or roots. These are then dyed and dried. The weavers bring out unique colored patterns as the basket shapes from the center. A 12-inch diameter basket takes about a week to complete. The baskets are used for storage or put up as wall hangings. Karen says it took years of research and experiments until a wide range of colors were obtained from local plants. The most recent additions to the color palette are blue from the indigo plant and black from the bark of the wattle tree.
The women work in their fields in the garden, but when they are free, when they have come from their gardens, they work on their baskets.
Oh, this is a side gate. The project is owned and run by the local women. The income goes directly to the local women to meet their basic needs. Once the handcrafts are finished, they are carefully packed for shipping. Baskets in Uganda were traditionally used to store food and as decorations during weddings and even to ferry secrets from one woman to another. Though, through the Rubona Basket Weavers Association, these women can earn a living, but the effectiveness of the group will only be determined once they live and put up the skills they have learned here to the test by running their own businesses. In my next report, I will take you to Uganda's Management and Technology University in Kampala, where a group of talented app developers are participating in a challenge competition to find homegrown solutions. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Paul. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. William and Kate wind up their whirlwind trip to the U.S. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Africa, a judge rules that prosecutors can pursue an appeal conviction against Oscar Pistorius for culpable homicide and seek murder charges. And UN officials say that Ebola transmission levels are particularly high in Sierra Leone and requires a more intensive international response. In Sudan, the United Nations destroys firearms and weapons seized from displaced persons camps over the past year in South Sudan. The new numbers suggest 100,000 elephants have been killed for ivory in the past 3 years and could be headed for extinction within decades. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge create a big buzz in New York. Now, William was greeted at the Empire State Building by New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, where he got a rainy view atop the iconic building. William and Kate ended their trip to the United States at a black tie scholarship fundraiser for their alma mater, St. Andrews, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Screaming fans were on hand to greet the royal couple. Kate wore a dark green crepe pleated off the shoulder, a Jenny Peckham dress. Now, from British royals to the former kings and princes of Iraq, royals have a soft spot for high-end cars. Now, a pristine 82-year-old Mercedes, once presented to the king of Iraq by Adolf Hitler, is one of a treasure trove of historic cars in an underground car park in Baghdad. The royal collection was used by Iraq's kings and princes until the monarchy was toppled in the 1950s. King Ghazi loved and owned prestigious German, British and American cars, so the Mercedes was likely to have been highly prized. Now, the collection will remain in the garage basement until the situation in the troubled country settles before the vintage cars can once again be shown to the public. And finally, have you always wanted your very own mini-me? Well, at this Paris shop, you can strike a pose in a scanning room where 54 cameras will capture you from every angle and then create a 3D figurine that you can share with friends. But beware, if you're planning on passing this off as a holiday gift, the end result is cool but pricey. A 1/12 scale model costs 230 euros, which is about 285 US dollars. Well, you got it. And that is what is trending today. Now, Team Vestas wind part of the 17 fleet contesting the Volvo Ocean Race has arrived at a massive crash into a coral reef some 430 kilometers northeast of Mauritius in the second stage of the grueling 9-leg global race. Now, the race teams are, battling very stiff winds as they sail toward Abu Dhabi from Cape Town. VOA's Caroline Turner recaps their recent South African port race.
On Wednesday, November 19th, family, friends, and sailing fans bid farewell to racers in Cape Town. Libby Greenhow of the all-girl team SCA greeted her brother Rob, who she will now be competing against as he joins the MAPFRE team. The Cape Town import race was a crowd pleaser. Fans watched the boats catch wind gusts and dodge wind holes and each other as they rounded the marks against the scenic backdrop. The fleet bunched up, with Assam Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing taking the honors for the import race. But the points only count in the event of a tie score at the conclusion of the round-the-world race. At the end of the import race, VIPs riding on board were forced to jump into the water for a splash pickup so teams don't have to stop. Here goes Francois Pignat, South African rugby union player, as he jumps off Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing. Next, Mike Horn, South African Swiss explorer, takes the plunge off Dong Feng. From the start, sailors got a taste of things to come with wind gusts up to 35 knots kicking up white-capped waves. The challenge is to keep the boat from breaking up, and most skippers opted for conservative sail choices to keep things in control. After the disappointment of being the last to finish leg 1 to Cape Town, the Spanish skipper of MAPFRE introduced a new navigator and watch leader. The team bounced back and briefly led the fleet by deploying their largest sail. The CEO of the Volvo Ocean Race, Knut Frosted, says the second leg is one of the toughest.
What's tough with it is that upwind is a lot tougher than downwind. You know, sailors don't think about wind strength. They think about wind strength and wind direction and waves. And all the three matches kind of to the perfect scenario of really, really tough conditions. So they will have sustained 25 up to 30, even more, closer to 40 knot stages upwind. And what is making it tough is the sea state. And now it has been blowing strong southerly wind directions around Cape de Good Hope for at least 2 to 3 days.
The fleet continued to sail in gale force conditions.
Cape Town is notorious for its wind and the wind hole as well. So when you start in the wind hole, you want to push, and then all of a sudden you've got 40 knots. It's a bit risky.
American skipper Charlie Enright.
Pretty nice to have some boats behind us in the backdrop, but we'll see if we can hang on to that. It's getting really weird ahead.
After the first night at sea, Team Alpha Medica had the lead, followed by MAPFRE and Dongfen Race Team. Leg 2 covers over 6,000 nautical miles from Cape Town to Abu Dhabi. The trip could take 3 to 4 weeks. The estimated time of arrival is between December 11th to 15th. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the morning to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords. When you hear or read stories about green technology, you might hear this word: biofuel. Listen for the word biofuel in this story about turning trash or waste into energy.
What we're doing is taking that was originally headed for a landfill. Half of this material is going to be processed for the conversion of biofuel such as ethanol.
Biofuel is fuel made from plant material or animal waste. Ethanol is a biofuel made from corn and other plants. In the United States, ethanol is mixed with gasoline and used to run cars.
Now, when you hear the word biofuel, your American English will be good enough to know what this newsword means.